Perception. Just look at this word. As we learn, perception impact attitude. Attitude impact behavior. There are something that you need to repeat every day. Right perceptions leads to right behavior. Repeating behaviors build your habits. So good habits build your competencies. And your competencies lead you to the success. All right. So perception is the root of behaviors. So that perception is critical important. The most important in terms of determining the success or the loss of someone's. In my course, if you forget everything you learned with me after the final exam, I strongly ask you to keep in mind the knowledge about perception. You can forget everything, especially for the students who are not major in business or in human resources management. And I know that there are students major in technical study, in natural science study in my classes. You can forget everything. I can help you get a high score, no problem. But you need to keep in mind the lecture about perceptions, because right perception leads to the right behaviors. Repeating the right behaviors build your competencies that lead to your success in your life. Okay, so our key topic in the course and the key topic of today's class and maybe the next class is about perception. Okay, it's about perception. Now, perception. Concept. What is perception? Then we move to the level of perception. This part this point you will not see in the book. I summarize this point of lecture from many different books and research that can help you understand better how you perceive things. And then we classify types of perception. What do you really perceive in your real life? And mistake that we usually make when we perceive or when we conduct the perception process. Okay, so here's the framework of our class about perception, the topic about perception. And perception is very, very important. Now, we back to the PowerPoint slides of chapter 6, perception. Chapter number 6. Chapter 6, where are you? Okay, just wait. New share. Chapter number 6. Let me close the window a little. So Where is it's here. All right. There's trouble with my PowerPoint slide. Oh, it's so many trouble today with you. Just wait for me a minute. All right, can you see the screen right now? Okay, what we go through first is the concept of perceptions. And in the book, they define perception is the process by which we, individuals, organize and interpret their sensory impression in order to give meaning to our environment. You know, I did a small test to my students for many times teaching the OB courses. Is that I let them read this, I let them read the definition and then ask them whether or not they understand something about this concept. And most of them, 90% of them saying that they understand nothing. That means they don't know anything. They don't understand anything about this concept. Very, very difficult to understand this concept. And let me explain it a little bit. That is our process in organize and interpret their sensory impressions. Actually, the word sensory impression here, what does it mean? Is the information. That's the information. You, the perceiver, the information you retain in your brain. In your brain. For sure, you only retain the information that impress you. Impress you. You go around, and you get into this class, and after you stay in the class for, let's say, 2 hours and 15 minutes, and then you get out, you get home. And when you review my lecture, something will stay in your head and something gets out for, let's say, forever. And you will build your understanding. The meanings that you give to the lecture will be based on the information that retain in your brain. Okay, but the information you retain, the information that you get by your sense. Sensory means that sensory impression means that the information you get into your brain by the sense. You listen, you hear, you touch, right? You listen or you hear, you touch, you taste, you read, or you see, right? Listen, hear, see, touch. You smell. All right. Whatever you do, by your five senses, you will get information. And the information you get by your senses, that is the sense we call what? Sensory impressions. I'm so impressed about your nice voice. This is a very delicious food. Your perception about the food that you eat, you taste, or you smell. This lecture gives me a big help in our life. Your perception about a lecture, you hear, you listen to, and what retain in your brain make you the meaning to what you get. All right, sensory impressions means that the information you retain in your brain by your five senses. You may hear something, you may see something, you may read something, you may touch someone or something, you may taste something, some food. All right, and the information from your sense retain in your brain and creates the way you understand things or people. And that is the process of perception. The process of perception. So let me define perception from the origin definition. This one is so difficult to understand, right? So I make it to another concept, or another, I express them in another way that easier to understand. Perception is the process through which an individual collect information by his or her sense. Sensory impression. Okay, sensory impression. Sensory impression means that information collected by sense to understand, not yet, to describe or to understand. To describe or to understand, that means to give meaning. To give meaning. To describe or to understand, that means to give meaning. An object. I don't have enough space here. To understand an object. An object here is maybe things, event, or human. remember, just back into our childhood when we were very, very young, very small. Sometimes we look at the sky and we saw the cloud, and we try to give meaning to the cloud that we see based on their shape, right? Based on their shape. We say, oh, there is an elephant in the sky. The elephant is the meaning that you give to the cloud on the sky. It's really the cloud. But to you and to me, to many of us when we were young, that is an elephant. There's elephant, there's a monkey, or a monster, a ghost, or something else that's very beautiful or very ugly in our mind. And by your eyes, we see the clouds on the sky, and we try to give to assign the name of some animals to that shape of the cloud. And that's the way we understand the environment around us. Okay, so the perception process can be understood like this way. The process through which individual collect information by his or her sense to describe, to understand an object. That means a things, an event, or a human. You can hear information about someone. You work with them and you collect information about by what you see, what you hear, and then you make conclusion about this person. That means your perception about him or her. Okay, so perception in terms of process or in terms of action, that is the process through which individual collect information to describe or to understand things or event. Things or event. All right. And here we miss one word, that is interpret. Interpret. We don't see things as it is. We don't see things as it really is. But we interpret what we see to give the meaning or to describe. We describe by our ways. So describe or understand means that interpret means that means you don't really perceive things as it is. But what you understand or what you describe is usually different from the origin things that you see. And that is the meanings of interpretation or translation. You don't keep the origin meaning of the things you perceive, but you create the meaning that you love to understand about the objects. All right? Any question about the concept of perception? No? All right, yeah. So, what impact perception? What impact perception? First, factor in the perceiver himself, factor in the situation, and factor in the target. The target here is what you try to perceive. We can say the object. And in Vietnamese, we say đối tượng nhận thức. We need an object to perceive. We need the target to perceive. Okay? And actually, we can see that the combination of the target is also belong to the situation. But because the target has its own characteristic, so some scientists distinguish the target from the situations. Some models include the target in the situation. And remember, we have P, A, B. And what impact P is individual, the perceiver, right? Any question? We have situation. And the situation here include the target. Include the target. All right. So after we have done the perception, what is the results of the perception process? What is the results of the perception process? Okay, look at this. It's difficult to understand the perception process, and just ask me or give me more discussion. Even ask me in Vietnamese, in Facebook, in our group, if you are not clear about what perception is. Okay, now let me go to another PowerPoint slide to show you what is the results of perception. All right, here is the object. Here is the object. Let's say the target. Is the target. He is the perceiver. Sorry, I am not good at hand. Okay, he is the perceiver. Yeah, it's the hand. Okay, it's the eyes. It's the nose. It's the ear. Oh, oh, it's so beautiful. All right, he is the perceiver. And the perceiver uses his or her senses to collect information, right? To collect information. The information from the target, the information from the target get into the brain of the perceiver, right? Information. But remember, only the information of the target move into the brain of the perceiver. He is the brain, not the target moving here. And based on the information, all right, he is the brain. Okay, based on the information, there will be a reflected image of the target. And it's not exactly the same as the target because it's only the reflected image, the reflection or reflected image of the target in the brain of the perceiver, not the target itself. So after you are done with the perception process, here is the results. The reflected image of the target. For example, the target is some kind of food. The information go, okay, no, not the target anymore, his food. By the information, by the sense go into the brain of the perceiver, he is the smell. Oh, it smells so good. It's the taste. And how the food look. See, combination information of all the three things, all information that collected by the three senses. The reflected image of the target means the food into the brain is delicious. The food itself may be delicious, may not be delicious, may be good, maybe not good, but in the presence of the perceiver who already ate the food, enjoy the food, he or she collected information by smelling, tasting, and seeing the fruit. The reflected image of the fruit in the brain of the perceiver. Here is the results. the reflected image of the food right now equal to delicious. In this case. Okay, now, not food anymore. My lecture. And for sure, you don't smell my lecture, right? You don't taste my lecture. You look, you see, you read my lecture. You hear my lecture. You watch my lecture. Okay. And by your senses, my lecture come into your brain. Some of you, just a person. In the brain of some lecture, you say, oh, excellent. Some of you. And now, the image of my lecture, the reflected image of my lecture into your brain is, oh, it's an excellent lecture. All right. To someone else, oh my God, what is he talking about? I feel nothing attractive from his lecture. I don't understand anything. So my God, it's very ugly, very bad lecture. To someone else, another one. So the reflected image of my lecture of his or in his or her is bad lecture. Bad lecture. Okay. All right. Now, also my lecture is not bad, not good in someone's brain because during my lecture, he or she look at, let's say, watch another movie or talk to her, his or her friend, and what say? At the end of my lecture, what remains in his or her brain because he used his or her senses to collect so many information at the same time, and at the end of my lecture, what remains in his or her brain is, let's say, a movie. My lecture look like a movie. Let's say Hạ cánh nơi anh. What is the name? I just translate word by word. Okay, word by word. Take up, landing. Okay, landing at me. Okay, landing at me. Hạ cánh nơi anh. All right. So by his or her sense, collect information about somewhere else about the movies during my lecture, and at the end of my lecture, someone asked him or her, "Hey, what did he talk about?" Oh, he just talked about landing at me movies. So the reflected image of my lecture in his or her perception is movie, landing at me movie. So the results of perception process is the reflected image of the target. Of the target. Okay. Of the target. And that is perception. After your perception process, you build the reflected image of the target in your brain. And because you are not exactly the same to anyone else, so that your perception will not be the same as your friend's perceptions. And remember, because your perception is the reflected image, not of the target, not the target itself, so that your perception about the target is never exactly the same as the target really is in the practice, because that is just only the reflected image. Nhận thức của chúng ta không bao giờ sát 100%, với thực tiễn, vì nó chỉ là hình chiếu của thực tiễn trong não của chúng ta mà. And the reflected image depends on your angle of view, góc bạn nhìn, depends on how you collect the information, and depends on many things else that make your reflected image different from the target itself in the practice. All right, so in sum, there are two things we need to understand about perception, just at the concept level. First, perception can be defined in two ways. The process through which one means that one individual collect information about the target, by his or her sense. Two, what? To describe, to understand. That means to give meaning, as in the origin, right? To give meaning to the target. And the target just means the environment around you, the perception target. To give meaning, to the target, to understand the target. The same, to describe or to understand the target. The same meaning with to give meaning to the target or the environment. And remember, you collect information by your senses. That means your sensory impressions. The second way of perception that you can define, as I showed you before, is the reflected image, reflected image. So we define perception by a second way. Perception is the reflection, or we can say the reflected image of the target or the object in perceiver, right? Based on his or her own way. The reflected image of the target, the object. The reflection or the reflected image, the same meaning. The target or the objects, the same meaning. His or her own way. And the reason why I say his or her own way, please, if you take notes, please highlight this one, highlight this. That means different people will perceive the same things differently. Back to this one. Some of you perceive my lecture as excellent. Some of you perceive my lecture as ugly. Some Some of you say, oh, my lecture is social. And some of you perceive the reflective image of my lecture in someone's friend is the Landing at Me movies. Landing at Me movie. So that the reflective image of one thing into different perceivers' friends will be different. That is the meaning of his or her own way. To the people who love my lecture, who love OE, who want to study more about HR, my lecture is good. To someone in social science, sorry, in natural science, in physical or in chemistry, oh, this lecture is social. I don't think it's good, but I don't think it's bad. And for someone who never care about what they learn, it looks like a movie. So it's different reflective image. We look at things and describe them by our ways, not describe them as they are. And the way you perceive will direct your behaviors. Okay? So right now, I would like to invite you to stop study, stop thinking a little bit, to look at a short movie that may make you refresh. And also this movie clips related to perception. And try to get this message from the movie clips. The perception, your perception, direct your behavior, control your behavior, regulates your behavior. Okay? All right, first of all, I want to test the sounds and the quality of the movie first. So let me know whether or not you can see it properly. Is everything okay? Okay, good. Now start over from the beginning. All right, can you hear me? Okay, good. Sorry. Now, what I just said that I am sure that in the reflective of image of the movie in your brain, it should much better than the reflective image of my lecture in your brain. So you for sure you must love watching the movie clip more than listening to my lecture. Is that correct? All right. Now, the perception of the pet, the perception of the pet, sorry, in the movie change according to the information that or she yes he or she gets from the practice. You can see that, and it's show you one more thing that we don't only perceive things, event as the movie clips, the fruit, but we also perceive events. Events. That means what happened. We perceive the process of things from one to another situation or one to another status. Okay, so let's back to our lecture today. Oh. Yes. Back to our lecture. Let's see. Let me write out one more time the framework of perception, and there will be a little bit different about what you have seen at the beginning. All right, we try to cover the concept that we already did. And we will go to the types first before the level. Sorry about this mistake. And then we move to the mistakes that we usually make when we perceive things. All right. Now we have done the concept of perceptions. And just explain a little bit more about perception so that you can understand things better. Perception depart from the word perceive. Means that you try to understand, to think about something. Okay. And what do we perceive during our life? Now we know about the concept, the process through which you collect information about the target. Now we classify types of perception based on the target we perceive. First, we may perceive things, sự vật, food, movie clips, the laptop, clothes, events. We perceive things, events, sự vật, hiện tượng. Process water. And that is what we perceive most in our life before we discover that there is another target that's much more attractive to perceive. That is perceive human. We perceive human. The other people. And the last type, self. We perceive ourselves. We try to draw a picture about ourselves. We try to reflect us in our mind. It's strange. It's new to you. So when you perceive self, you have a word, we say self-perceiving or self-perception. And another words, the synonym or the same meaning, that is introspect or introspection. Verb and noun. Verb and noun. Introspection. The process through which one collects information by his or her senses about him or herself, to understand, to describe himself or herself, self-perceiving. And there are three types of perception. And for sure, when we talk about a mistake, the same. We have mistake when we perceive things and events. We have mistake when we perceive human. We have mistake when we perceive self. Okay? So the concept of perception, we already done. The types of perception, we already done. And the importance of perception, we repeat that in every classes. All right. So when people ask you, what do you perceive? I may perceive things and events. I may perceive you, the human, or I may perceive self. And let me tell you this. The scientists found that you devoted around 30 to 40% of your life, 40% of your lifetime to do perception of things and events. You devote more than 80% of your lifetime to perceive people. And we spend less than 15% to perceive self. Remember, we don't need to sum up all of them to equal to 100%. No, we can perceive different things at the same time. And actually, let me tell you this. The scientists also found that we don't really need to spend as much as time like that on perceiving people. And we should increase the total time we use for self-perceiving to be more successful. Or in another word, we say that in our life, we spend more time. We spend more time to judge others. We spend more time than needed to judge others. And we spend much less time than needed to understand self. And that is the key reason why we get the failure or loss in our life. We spend more time than needed to judge the others. And we spend much less time than required to understand self. Chúng ta dùng rất nhiều thời gian hơn cần thiết để đánh giá người khác. To perceive others. Và chúng ta dùng rất ít thời gian so với mức độ cần phải có để hiểu mình. We use much less time than required to understand self. And that's the practice the scientist found, not me. And that explains the reason why we usually get a failure when we perceive the others or in our life or in our job. For example, just very simple example. When I was a student in the university, and I went to the university, went to the class, and most of the time when I sat in the class, I used my time to look around, to judge some of my friends. Oh, this guy must be very rich. Oh, this girl, this female was so beautiful. Oh, the weather is so good. But the key points that I need to concentrate is the lecture. I lose my concentration because I use most of my time to perceive things and events and people that not related to my goals or my situations. Because we use more time to just order or to just things or events. And that is the mistake we try to avoid. And to avoid the mistake, first of all, we need to understand what the mistakes are. Today, we don't have enough time to go through the levels and the mistake, but I would just want to share with you two more things about perception, and then we end. Usually, in our life, we waste time for the two persons. And the two persons are two key mistakes we usually make when we perceive others, when we perceive humans. And when I use the word persons here, that means that is negative persons. Passion that you do it more than needed. You love to do so. And the first passion that we usually encounter, that is judging the others. We have the intention, the propensity to judge others much more than we need. You look at your friends and you have conclusion about him or her. You look at me, you have evaluation about your lecture at the first look, and maybe your evaluation about myself is nothing related to the lecture. He's ugly, he's handsome, he is easygoing, he's friendly, blah, blah, blah. And second passion is to prove I am correct. We try to prove that we are correct in any situation. And they are the two passions that people usually encounter when they interact with humans. Nó có hai cái đam mê cơ bản, được gọi là hai cái lỗi cơ bản mà con người thường mắc trong quá trình tương tác với con người. Đam mê số 1, đánh giá người khác. Đam mê số 2, chứng minh mình đúng. The two passions takes your time and consume your energy. Remember, your resources, your energy is limited. When you use your energy so much for something that you don't really need to, you don't have enough energy or resources for all the activities that you need to conduct. And if you don't change your perception to the right way, it's very easy for you to make the mistake like that. You will judge people more than you need, and you will judge people in the wrong way. And also, you will try to prove that you are correct in many situations that you don't need to prove. In many situations, you just say, yes, that is your idea, that's your opinion, that is my opinion. No need to say you are correct or I am wrong. For example, to the movie clips that I just let you watch, many people will have different points of view about the movie. Is that good movie? Is that bad movie? Is that good for study? Or that just for entertainment? You know, for 60% of my students, after I asked them, how do you feel about the movie? What did they say? So lovely. Most of my students. Khi thầy hỏi cái sinh viên của thầy sau khi coi cái video clip đó, các bạn cảm thấy thế nào? Khoảng 60% nó bảo thế này. Ôi dễ thương quá. Oh my God, I don't ask you about how lovely it is. My intention is what you learn from that, but it's no problem. You feel that's a lovely film, a lovely video clips, okay. Nothing wrong with that. Không có gì sai cả. And I feel that, I found that I consider the movie clip is very useful for learning and you say the video clip is so beautiful and so lovely. Who is wrong and who is correct here? No one wrong, no one right. Just our description, our feeling about the movie. So we don't need to say, oh, your conclusion, your feeling about the movie is not correct. It's a big lesson. You say, oh, that's a lesson to you, not to me. To me, the movie clip is so lovely. That's okay. Nothing wrong, nothing right here. So keep in mind the two negative patterns that we need to avoid. And we will continue the perception sections in the next week, next class, by talking about the levels and the mistake. Okay, so now it's on for today's class. The remaining some minutes will be for you to ask the questions or something you are not clear about.